there are those that miracles seem to follow. Why is that so? Today we're going to look at a familiar Bible passage in the book of Judges to see what we can learn about our heart atmosphere being right for miracles. So in the beginning of our story, I'm going to go to Judges 13, and I'm just going to kind of spot read some stuff here to try and help narrate the story, if you will. It says, "Again, the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord delivered them into the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. So that's verse 1 of chapter 13. And it says that the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. Now notice it didn't say they did evil in their own sight. It says that they did evil in the sight of the Lord. And the Lord delivered them into the hand of the Philistines. In other words, he delivered them into captivity for 40 years. 40 is a number of testing in the Bible. So they did evil in God's sight. He delivered them into captivity for a period of testing. And it says in verse 2, "Now there was a certain man from Zorah of the family of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren and had no children." Manoah means rest. So even in this period of testing in this land of the Philistines, there was a man who had rest as a name, all right? And his wife was barren and had no children. And the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, "Indeed, now you are barren and have no children, but you shall conceive and bear a son. Now, therefore, be careful not to drink wine or similar drink, and not to eat anything unclean, for behold, you shall conceive and bear a son. And no razor shall come upon his head, for the child shall be a Nazirite to God from the womb, and he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines." Now, right off the bat in our story, there's a miracle. The miracle is that the angel of the Lord appears to a woman who is barren and prophesies to her, speaks to her, and tells her that she's going to have a son. And that son is going to be set aside, set apart, separated for God's purpose. That's what Nazirite really means, separate. And that there's a purpose for this son, that this son is going to help deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines. He's going to help bring them out of this time of testing, hopefully with a successful outcome, right? So the woman came and told her husband, saying what had happened. And she says, "And he said to me, behold, you shall conceive and bear a son. Now drink no wine or similar drink, nor eat anything unclean, for the child shall be a Nazirite to God from the womb to the day of his death." She kind of added something on there, but the idea is that he's going to be separated out for God's purposes. And so Manoah, he wants kind of to see what happens, and he wants to meet this man, this angel of the Lord, so to speak. And so a little bit later, the angel reappears to her. And Manoah's not there, but she goes and gets him. And it says in verse 11, "So Manoah arose and followed his wife. When he came to the man, he said to him, 'Are you the man who spoke to this woman?' And he said, 'I am.'" Now, this is a picture of a pre-incarnate Christ, the angel of the Lord. Notice he says, "I am." The "I am" says, "I am." And Manoah said, "Now let your words come to pass. What will be the boy's rule of life and his work?" So the angel of the Lord said to Manoah, "Of all that I have said to the woman, let her be careful. She may not eat anything that comes from the vine." That's key. "May not eat anything that comes from the vine, nor may she drink wine or similar drink, nor eat anything unclean. All that I commanded her, let her observe." Then Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, "Please let us detain you, and we shall prepare a young goat for you. And there's some discussion back and forth. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. Verse 17 says, Then Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, What is your name? That when your words come to pass, we may honor you. And the angel of the Lord said to him, Why do you ask my name, seeing it is wonderful? Again, pre-incarnate Christ, angel of the Lord. It is wonderful. So Manoah took a young goat with grain offering and offered it Let me try again. So Manoah took the young goat with the grain offering and offered it upon the rock to the Lord. And he did a wondrous thing while Manoah and his wife looked. And wondrous here is talking about a separation. So you're talking about, the sacrifice on the altar is separated out or cut in a certain way. It says he did a wondrous thing while they looked on. And it happened as the flame went up towards heaven from the altar. The angel of the Lord ascended in the flame of the altar. And when Manoah and his wife saw this, they fell on their faces to the ground. When the angel of the Lord appeared no more to Manoah and his wife, and then Manoah knew that he was the angel of the Lord. And Manoah said to his wife, We shall surely die because we have seen God. They got it. What a miracle. The angel of the Lord, the focus is right. They want to worship him. The angel of the Lord's there. He does this wondrous act. He rightly separates the sacrifice. The things there that are pre-incarnate Christ, the types and shadows there are great. It's a great part to the story. We could spend a lot of time just breaking that all down. There's much about the story that A, and B, that we could really break down in a pretty, interesting fashion. I love word studies and things. We could do that. It's not the point of the lesson today. In fact, the lesson, I was just talking about this a few minutes ago, kind of tongue-in-cheek, I named the lesson, To Hair is Human, and it was just silly. The lesson title here is mostly silly. But I just want to narrate our way through this story as we get to the point here. So, verse 24. So the woman bore a son and called his name Samson, which means sunlight. She called him sunlight. You might say, well, she could have called him sunshine. Same thing, right? Sunlight. That's what she called him. Very positive kind of name. And the child grew, and the Lord blessed him. And the Spirit of the Lord began to move upon him at Meniah, Dan, between Zorah and Eshtal. So we see the beginning of Samson. Set aside, separated, consecrated for God's purposes to help his country. One of the judges of Israel. And then we hit what I called the Middle Ages, for Samson anyway. This is found in Judges 14 through 15. And I'm just going to talk about some basic things here. I'm not necessarily going to read any particular scriptures in here. 14 and 15 tells us, first of all, that Samson goes down and he sees a woman, and she catches his eye, and he says, I found this woman. Go get her for me that she could be my wife. So Samson tells his parents, hey, go get this child. Now I'm going to embellish and put the Dan version of the translation on the word here a little bit. But I look at this and I see Samson as someone who is just a bit full of himself. He's mom and dad's little sunlight. And as he's growing and there's a call on his life, he's kind of, hey, you go get this person for me, mom and dad, she could be my wife. You just go do this. And they're not really all that excited about it. And he says, hey, that's what I want, I'll hold my breath. No, he doesn't say that. But so that's the kind of idea that I get when I read that. And he goes down there. He deals with this lion. He slaughters it, and they go through this whole thing where he gives them a riddle to solve, and you probably are familiar with this story. And we see this series of things. Samson does these great feats for Israel in dealing with the Philistines. He slays a bunch of them with the jawbone of a donkey, and he does all of these things. And the Philistines, they're pretty much fed up. They're trying to get rid of him. And so I want you to look at something. Samson is blessed. And why is he blessed? He's blessed because God has a call in his life. He's blessed because he has been separated out for God's purposes. Now, is everything in his life perfect? No. But he's true to what the word of God was spoken to his parents. He's not laying a razor to his hair. Haircuts are not against God, by the way. But it was something that he was separated out by that statement. Now, there are life patterns. And with Samson, we immediately see a pattern in his life with regards to women. And his looking upon them, and apparently beauty is a great swayer of Samson's emotions. And we see that pattern of being kind of driven by what he wants, his wants. And at the same time, having his needs needing to be met in terms of, his happiness, what I'm going to do. But that's who I want, Mom. That's who I want, Dad. That's what I want to do. And yet it says that the Spirit of the Lord comes upon him, and he does great feats when the Spirit of the Lord comes upon him. And so I want to just we've hit these middle part of Samson's life, if you will. And I want to put a little comma, a little pause in our story. And I want to give you my focus for this lesson. 2 Chronicles 7:14 says, "If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land." Now, we're going to look at this towards the end of the lesson as well. But I want you to see something. There's a message here. If my people, the ones that are called by my name, identified by my name, if they will humble themselves, and that's not all about me, it's not how great I am, but if they'll humble themselves and pray. We sometimes struggle with that pray thing, and yet it should be the easiest thing in the world to pray. Particularly if we're not praying to get my way, but to have a conversation with God and understand his way. What's our focus? It says, pray and seek my face. In other words, seek an intimate relationship with God. Seek to be face to face with God. And turn from their wicked ways. This kind of clearly states that we probably have wicked ways if we need to turn from them. Remember, this is if my people. So we deal with things. We deal with the wickedness of our own heart. The desire to self-promote. The desire to be the most important thing. The most important one, etc. It says, if we'll turn from our wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will heal their land. Well, that's what we like to say, but it's not what it says. It says, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin. First and foremost, forgive their sin. And then I'll heal their land. So in this series, we're talking about an atmosphere for miracles. In this series, trying to create an atmosphere for miracles, we've talked about the relationship side of things quite a bit. And we've talked about salvation as just one of the huge keys to miracles happening. Understand here what this just said is that first your sin needs to be forgiven, and then he can heal your land. That kind of sets a precedence for how God wants things to go. Right relationship, then we heal the land. And there's a lot of reasons we could go in. How do you heal the land if you haven't fixed the sin? It's like trying to wash and clean a pot in a mud hole. How are you going to do that? Every time you go to wash it, you make it dirty again. So you need to forgive their sin, then you can heal the land. So to put this in perspective on how I want to think about our lesson today, we want to create an atmosphere for miracles. And I'm making an assumption here, which I just want to be very clear to you what that assumption is. It is one thing to want to have fire insurance. In other words, I want to make sure I make heaven, so I want to ask God to forgive my sins, and I want to ask him to be Lord of my life. And that is absolutely key for this whole series, that we have that concept right. But I'm really not trying to talk in this series about the idea that you need to get saved, end of story. I'm hopefully trying to help us learn how to create an atmosphere for miracles so God can move through us to do the miraculous, heal those that need healing, but first get them in a right relationship, then heal them, and his manifest presence be in our midst as a ministry outreach, as God bringing people to himself. Right focus. So I'm assuming that you may want to be at a different level than just fire insurance, than just, hey, I got saved, I'm going to make heaven by the hair of my chinny chin chin, so to speak. But in fact, you might want to be used of God to minister to people. That you might want to be used by God to do signs and wonders, to do the miraculous. And there's many different places where there's schools of thought regarding this. And they'll tell you you need to pray these scriptures, or you need to put your hand on someone in this way, or you need there's all of these things. And yet, if we create an atmosphere for miracles, if we really create an atmosphere for miracles, and we really recognize that it all comes from God, and we really recognize the relationship aspect of those things, and that Christ is the author and finisher of our faith, if we really envelop that atmosphere, then the manifest presence of God will, exactly what it says, will be manifest. And when God's presence is manifest, miracles happen. It's not a pattern that makes it so. It's a heart condition. It's an atmospheric heart condition that creates those moments for God's presence to come in, when our hearts are right, when our minds are focused, our spiritual condition is right. That's when those miracles begin to happen. Now, Are there exceptions? Yes. God's God. He is the one who does the miracles. He doesn't necessarily have to have a person doing exactly these things. He's God. He can do a miracle if he wants to. But if we want to best position ourselves to be used of God, then there's things we need to do. So now I've hopefully set that perspective for you. And so I want to continue our story in Judges 16 with a woman named Delilah. 16:1 says, Now Samson went to Gaza and saw a harlot there and went into her. When the Gazites were told Samson has come here, they surrounded the place and lay in wait for him all night at the gate of the city. They were quiet all night, saying, In the morning when it is daylight, we will kill him. And Samson lay low till midnight. Then he arose at midnight, took hold of the doors of the gate of the city and the two gateposts, pulled them up, bar and all, put them on his shoulders, and carried them to the top of a hill that faces Hebron. Now, this is an interesting little passage because I don't believe that God is interested in us going and spending time in the presence of harlots in the way that Samson did here at all. Samson was far from a perfect vessel. He was very flawed. And this description here clearly describes some of the fraud. Now, it doesn't say that the Spirit of the Lord came upon him and he took a hold of the doors, but that based on the other things that we have seen in the story, that's what we're supposed to take away from it, is that the presence of God has been on Samson. He's able to do these miraculous things because he's been separated out for God's purposes. He's designed, his life is built around from before his birth that he is going to be separated out for God to use to bring judgment and to free the Israels from the testing captivity of the Philistines. So bear with me here. Verse 4, afterward, it happened that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. And this is really what I want to start to drill down on. If we really want to see God move, if we really want to see God move through us, if we really want to be in that position, I don't think we can be like Samson and take the idea of separation or sanctification for God's purposes and misuse it in the way that he has. Now, I told you earlier, there's a pattern, life pattern that he's created, and one of those patterns involves women. And so here it is, a woman that is in his life yet again in verse 4. But he loves a woman. She's in the valley of Sorek. The valley of Sorek, Sorek has to do with the color red, and specifically red on the vine. And it's literally talking about the valley of wine, if you will. Now, what was part of Samson's vow? No wine, no haircut. His mother, no wine, no strong drink. But Samson's kind of, I'm going to be really true to this one point over here, but I'm going to be kind of nonchalant over there. And Sorek also can be the idea of to hiss or catcall, an embarrassment. So here he is. He finds a woman in the valley of wine and catcalls. This is not really someplace he's necessarily called to be looking for a wife or a woman. And the one he finds there that catches his eye is named Delilah. And Delilah means languishing. Basically, it means failing to make progress or be successful. It means to slacken. or dangle, as in like a bucket into a well by a rope, or to let down. And it also has the meaning to deliver. Again, like to deliver from the bucket. Delilah is going to deliver Samson to his enemies. But she is the example of languishing. This is where Samson has been. He's been languishing. Even while he's been doing these great feats, he's been lax or slack or dangling with regards to being separated for God's purposes. Kind of taking it for granted. The pattern has been established. In his life, the pattern has been established. There's people, you just watch them, they just fall back into the same patterns. They can't help themselves. Sometimes they tell you they can, but they can't. They've created a pattern that they can't easily break free from. They want to be used of God, but they can't quite stay separated and consecrated for the purpose. This is a great place for us to be able to do a self-appraisal and kind of look and, God, where am I not upholding my end of the bargain? Where am I not being separated out for your cause and your purposes? So that Delilah is being paid to basically find out all the things she can about Samson's strength and how they can bind him up and they can defeat him. You know the story. You know about it. He tells her a little bit and it gives her a little bit of this. So, this is what happens. And so he's making fun of me and he keeps, they pounce on him and he fights him off and God's still blessing him. I don't know what Samson's stature really was. You would assume that he was a big, strong dude. And yet there's an element of the fact that, God is blessing him, God is blessing him, God is blessing him as a source of his strength. So maybe he wasn't a big, strong-looking dude. Maybe he was an average-looking dude and just happened to have great strength when God came upon him. That seems to be borne out by what happens when God no longer has his spirit upon him and he gets taken captive. Seems a lot more ordinary. See, Samson suffers deceit at the hands of Delilah because he's created this pattern of really wrong relationship with women, but because he's been strict to the letter of the law regarding cutting his hair, but he hasn't been strict to the idea of being set aside for God's purposes. Kind of taken it for granted a little bit. Hasn't really been set aside in his own heart and mind. And I wrote down here, deceit multiplied to blindness. See, he is so deceived by himself that he's telling Delilah a little bit more and more about what it is that truly will cause him to violate his vow. But he never says that. He never says, if I do this, I'll violate my commitment, my separation to God until the very end. It's down in, let me look and see. It's down in verse 17 that he told her all his heart and said to her, no razor has ever come upon my head, for I have been a Nazirite to God from my mother's womb. If I am shaven, then my strength will leave me, and I shall become weak and be like any other man. See, at that moment, He is so deceived in who this woman is. She's already multiple times taken the information he's given her and attacked him with it, or allowed him to be attacked with it. Did he learn anything from that? No. He's completely wrong focus. So then he finally tells her the whole truth of it. And what was he thinking? I mean, he said, well, he wasn't, and that's true. But see, he's blinded to the temptress. He's blinded to how slack he's become. We allow ourselves to justify our actions, justify what we want, and we don't pay attention to the separation God has called us to if we really want to see him move through our life. And you can say, well, I'm just happy to have my fire insurance, but I'm telling you that, God puts a call in your life and he wants to do great and mighty things through you, but there's a cost. And that's part of what this is. So he tells her, she cuts his hair off. Verse 20 says, then she said, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. So he awoke from his sleep and said, I will go out as before at other times and shake myself free. We've talked about this in the past, but at this point, he is already blind to the whole situation. Blinded to the deceit. Blinded to the source of his strength. I will go out as before and shake myself free. Not God will deliver me. He's my strength. It says, but he did not know that the Lord had departed from him. Completely blind. There are those that become completely blind. God blesses them, does things in their midst. And they justify their actions. They see how close they can dance to the line. They don't honor that separation for God's purposes. And then they wonder, why isn't that happening anymore? Why aren't there miracles? And verse 21 says, then the Philistines took him and put his eyes out and brought him down to Gaza, and they bound him with bronze fetters, and he became a grinder in the prison. He was supposed to set Israel free, and he became bound. He was unaware of his loss of strength because he became unaware of his source of strength. He lost his eyesight, but it was because he was blinded before. He was blinded by himself. He was blinded by his being, slack. He was blinded by languishing. You say, well, it's Delilah's fault. No, it was his fault. Let's see how close we can get to the line. Let's see how close we can get to doing what we're not supposed to do. Let's see if we can dance that little fine line and get real close to doing wrong. It feels right to me. Surely God's still going to bless me just because I'm so wonderful. No. We're supposed to be separated out for God's purposes. Now, this is kind of a hard lesson. And I don't mean to, throw a wet blanket on you or whatever, but I want you to think about this. I want you to think about where it is you've been languishing, where it is you've been letting things justify their way along in your life. And the loss is that manifest presence of God. That loss is the opportunity to step into the great things that God may have for you to do. And you can say, well, I've never felt, particularly called in this way or that way. You know what? Separate yourself for God. Take the high road, not the low road. See what God's got in store for you. I'll tell you, you're not going to regret it. You're never going to regret getting closer to God. You're never going to regret separating out those things that are questionable from your life. Now, I'm sure there are those that will listen to this and they'll instantly know I am talking about them and this particular area of their life. And that is absolutely not the case. But if that's the way it strikes you, then maybe you need to listen to what the Holy Spirit's telling you. What I'm telling you is this. Put God first. Recognize that He's the source. Listen to the call that He has upon you. Don't see how close you can dance to the line, but instead, see how tightly you can embrace the Father. And that's it for this week.